Well, this has been a long time coming. We, for a long time, have been asked to look at some oversimplified videos. Well, we were we were gonna relent from doing these because I'm a history major, so I know pretty much the majority of these conflicts and all that. But that being said, a lot of people have said that oversimplified is very funny, and I think it was one of their mini wars videos, which I think was the Falkland Island mini war. Which, have you heard about the Falkland Island War? The Falkland Islands were actually a set of islands off the coast of Argentina that were set up by the that actually were colonized at the same time by the British and the French, and the French and British both left, but they left a stone behind saying that this land belongs to us, seriously belongs to us, nobody else. And then someone from I think it was from Portugal showed up, or no, not Portugal, from Spain showed up and said, "Hey, this belongs to us." And the British were like, "No, it doesn't. It belongs to us." And then the British and the Spaniards fought it out, and the British won, so it was put under British rule. But X amount of years later, 1982 rolls around, and the president of Argentina, who is a vindictive and vengeful bastard, says that those islands now belong to us. So the Brits are like, "Wait, what? No, we have British people who live on this island. And plus we fought the Spaniards for it, and it belongs to us." And they're like, no, it belongs to us. So they do an invasion, and they pretty much take the island over. And then the Brits come back with a huge military force and take the island back. And it was a whole bloody affair that, to this day, Argentina and the UK do not get along strictly because of that war.
It's just over a small island.
Small little islands that have sheep on them.
Yeah.
And gauchos. That's it. Sheep and gauchos. And they decided, hey, you know what? Let's put it to a vote. The Argentinian government was like, all right, yeah, let's put it to a vote. Yeah, the people who are voting on that island, because they're closer to us, and plus a lot of Argentinians live there, they're going to want to say, hey, yeah, let's belong to Argentina again. And the vote passed, and it was 98-2 in favor of British rule. And the Argentinians were just like, fuck. So, yeah, that's what happened. So, oversimplified. I watched, like I said, the Falkland Islands videos, and I've seen a few snippets here and there, but I have not seen any of the World War series, and I haven't seen the Hitler series, and I don't think I've seen the I haven't seen the American Revolutionary series. So they've got a lot of very interesting videos. So I want to watch these and see what happens. So we're gonna watch Oversimplified World War I parts 1 and 2 because they're both very short. They're both only like 6-7 minutes apiece. So we're gonna watch both of these and we're gonna see what happens. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
The world of 1914, a time of modern technology, culture, and fashion. Truly the height of civilization. Let's have a war. Everyone knew a big war was coming. France wanted some stuff back that Germany had taken from it. Germany wanted to take more of everyone's stuff, and they were building a big sexy navy that was making the British uncomfortable. These two empires thought they were really cool, but lots of different people who lived there didn't think it was so cool. And some of them had even been declaring independence with help from Russia. Everyone was talking about each other behind each other's backs, throwing the fact that military technology had come a long way since the last major war, and suddenly everyone was pretty eager to beat each other up. In this area of Austria-Hungary lives some Serbs and Bosnians who hated living in Austria-Hungary. So the Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand goes there for a nice drive in an open-top car with his car's route published in advance. And that went just about as well as you'd expect. Some assassins were waiting for him along the way and threw bombs at his car, but they missed and blew up some officers behind him instead. So the Archduke goes into hiding, leaves Sarajevo, and the Archduke doesn't leave, but instead goes back out in the open-top car to visit the injured officers in hospital. The driver takes a wrong turn and by sheer coincidence gets stuck beside one of the failed assassins, who shoots him. Austria-Hungary is understandably pissed about all this, and they think the Serbian government had something to do with it, which they might have. So they go to their ally Germany and say, hey Germany, we're going to declare war on Serbia, and Germany is all for that. So Austria-Hungary send a big list of impossible demands to Serbia, and when Serbia refuses, they declare war. Austria-Hungary and Germany are friends, and Serbia is protected by Russia, who's friends with France, so they'll declare war on each other. Montenegro joins in
Old
too.
war
France
allegiances.
and Britain also have a kind of alliance. So when France says, "Hey Britain, you got my back?" Britain is like, maybe. And then they decide to stay out of it, which is great for Germany, because Germany has a plan. They know that Russia is so big and clumsy that it will take them a while to get ready for war. So with
As
this
it
guy
does
in
with
charge,
every war.
Germany will send all its troops into France at lightning speed while Russia's getting ready. Defeat France, then move all the troops to Russia and defeat Russia, and then we all speak German and eat Pfefferpottast every day. Just one problem. France has loads of forts and defenses along its German border, and Germany can't waste any time fighting them, so Germany decides to go around them. Through Belgium. Belgium is neutral, but Germany wants to march 750,000 troops through it to get around France's defenses. They're hoping Belgium will just kind of sit down and shut up, but they don't. They fight back. And they're pretty good too, so they slow the Germans down. What's worse is that Britain shows up, and they're pretty pissed that Germany's invading neutral countries. So now Britain declares war on Germany. So Germany push on through Belgium and commit some atrocities along the way. They also wear spikes and sometimes skulls on the uniform. So if you're trying to not look like the bad guys, good job. The Allies have a propaganda extravaganza, and this starts having an influence around the world, notably in America. The US President Woodrow Wilson sees himself as a bit of a Jesus figure, and spends most of the war trying to get everyone to just hug it out. But there's also a large population of ethnic Germans living in the United States, and when the war first broke out, they were like, yay Germany! But now that they're committing atrocities in Belgium, they're less enthusiastic. Let's play Spot the French Soldier. Did you see him? Easy, right? He's wearing a bright blue uniform with red trousers. And do you know who else spotted him easily too? The Germans. So when the French were slowly marching in columns through the countryside, the Germans easily tore them to shreds with their giant guns. All the nations involved in this war went in with an old school war mentality, and all of them had to update their uniforms and tactics a lot during the Great War. Because this war was going to be like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Russia's ready for war, and way earlier than expected. Hey Austria-Hungary, can you get on top of that? Oh yeah, sure, we've got this. Nope. So Germany has to send some troops back to the east to defend against the Russians. The chief of staff of the Austro-Hungarian army is this guy, and although he is handsome, he turns out not to be the best military strategist. Austria-Hungary constantly ignores Germany's advice, and then comes running back to Germany whenever they get in trouble. Austria-Hungary even gets its ass kicked by tiny Serbia, who repels all their invasion attempts at the start of the war. It's better news for Germany in the north, though, where they almost completely wipe out the Russian Second Army. Back on the Western Front, the Germans continue advancing and are in sight of Paris. At this point, anyone would be forgiven for thinking the Germans were going to get that quick victory after all. But then things start to go wrong. The French commander-in-chief knew something had to be done, and he ordered his armies to stop retreating. In the resulting battle, a gap opened up in the German lines. If a gap opens up, the enemy can use it to flank you from the side and behind, so the German armies have to retreat. The Allies launch a counterattack, so the Germans dig into defensive positions. The Allies do the same. Then both sides move north, trying to outflank each other along the way. When they reach the sea, they're in a stalemate with trench systems running the whole way from the coast to Switzerland, the beginning of trench warfare on the Western Front. Here's how trench warfare works. Two opposing lines of trenches with no man's land in between. One side would pummel the other with hundreds of thousands of artillery shells, sometimes for days at a time. This had a huge psychological effect on the soldiers, leaving many shell-shocked. Then, the attacking troops would leave their trenches and rush across no man's land, a muddy wet mass of shell craters and barbed wire. The defending trench would unleash machine gun fire on the attackers, inflicting thousands of casualties. The attackers would send wave after wave until either they gave up or the opposing trench was finally overrun. There would be months of fighting and the deaths of thousands in order to gain a few meters or kilometers of land. Living in the trenches was hard work too. Corpses, mud that could swallow you whole, pools of poisonous water, rats, disease, the smell. It's insane that millions of soldiers put up with these conditions, and commanders ordered them to do so for years.
That's crazy shit. That's crazy shit.
Oh yeah, man. World War II is no joke, man. Or World War I was no
World War
joke.
I, rather, yeah.
I mean, it was brutal. Both World Wars were excessively brutal. More died in World War II, but World War I showed just how bad war can get in some cases.
Yeah.
Man.
With both sides stuck in a hard stalemate, they knew this war wasn't going to be about taking territory, but about simply wearing each other down. The Allies had plenty of men to expend from its overseas dominions, and the British also started a naval blockade, so Germany couldn't import stuff, like food. Neither side really wanted a long, grueling war, though, so they both thought of ways to break the deadlock on the Western Front. Idea number 1, new frontiers. When the war first broke out, Australia was quick to take German New Guinea. The Allies also quickly jumped on Germany's colonies in Africa, and particularly in German East Africa, locals were enlisted as soldiers and carriers by both sides, leading to a tragic loss of life for the native Africans. Some new combatants entered the war as well. The Allies' new friends were Italy and Japan. Japan was busy building itself an empire, so it was more than happy to take away German islands and colonies in East Asia. Italy actually had an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary before the war, but after some tense relations, and then the Allies promising to give them some of Austria-Hungary's stuff, they switched sides.
Yep.
Italy opened up a front in the mountains here, but like everyone else, they were stuck in stalemate for most of the war. The Central Powers' new friend was a struggling empire in the Middle East. The Ottomans were divided on whether to actually join the war or not, since they had been exhausted by the recent Balkan Wars. Some of the politicians who did want to join went off on their own and fired some shells at Russia, and then came back and said, whoops, looks like we're at war now. The Ottoman entry into the war was of particular concern to the British, since the Middle East was full of oil, and Britain wanted all of that oil. First, the Ottomans tried to attack Russia in the Caucasus Mountains, but they weren't prepared for the cold, and many of them froze to death. Then they crossed miles of desert to take the Suez Canal from the British, but that failed too. Then the Allies tried to take the Dardanelles at Gallipoli in a long and hard trench warfare campaign, but that also failed. The Ottomans blamed their initial losses on the ethnic Armenians living within Ottoman territory, and the resulting Armenian genocide led to the deaths of 1.5 million people. Then the Germans sent spies into Afghanistan to try to convince the Arab tribes there to rise up in jihad against the British and attack India. But that plan failed, partly because the spies got bored, brewed their own alcohol, and got drunk, which is a bad thing to do in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
All these new frontiers hadn't done much to change the war.
That's a paddling.
Aware that the Allies had more men and supplies than them, the Germans knew they had to do something to break the stalemate. Before the war, there was a big conference that set out the rules of modern warfare. No chemical weapons, no killing civilians. Basically, don't be jerks. The Germans held a meeting and decided to be jerks. Zeppelin air raids commenced over British cities. They also started attacking the Allied trenches with chlorine gas, and they used submarines to sink civilian ships. One such civilian ship was the Lusitania, which had 159 Americans on board when it was sunk, further swaying U.S. opinion against the Germans.
I was about to get liberated.
Completely unfair to the Germans. The Allies also engaged in chemical warfare soon after, and they had been hiding anti-submarine weapons on their civilian ships, which let the Germans justify their attacks. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary still hadn't dealt with Serbia, so the Central Powers enlisted some help. Bulgaria wished it was bigger and was still bitter about losing the Second Balkan War. The Central Powers promised to make all of Bulgaria's wildest dreams come true if they helped, so they signed on, and together they knocked out Serbia. All of Bulgaria's wild...
Is that Harambe?
Yeah, it kind of looks like it.
Oversimplified, I'm disappointed in you. How dare you? How dare you do that to the great and noble Harambe? He died for our sins.
Showing him as an angel.
You're right. I'm too harsh on that. I forgive you, Oversimplified. Harambe forgives you too.
All his dreams come true if they helped, so they signed on, and together they knocked out Serbia. The Serbian troops retreated through Albania, which was neutral but had some ties to Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary entered Albania in a friendly invasion to chase down the Serbians.
Hey,
many of them escaped by sea. It's 1916, and a lot is happening. As if they didn't have enough enemies already, Germany added one more to the list. Portugal had been getting a bit chummy with the Allies behind the scenes, and Germany didn't like that one bit. Around the same time, the only sea battle of the war happened. Both sides had a new powerful class of battleships called dreadnoughts, but they were so expensive to build that neither side wanted to risk losing them in a battle, so they kept them in port, except for one time when they had a big fight and a bunch of them got damaged, so they didn't try that again. The UK started
How fucking
conscripting men
nervous
to
do
the
you
army,
think, like,
so
the
they had
green
plenty of
country in the
reserves,
upper
which
left, I don't
just
know
as
which
well
one that
because
is.
Oh, that's the
Western
Netherlands.
was about
Yeah,
to
how fucking nervous do you think the
longest
Netherlands
and
were
one of the
during all
bloodiest
this
battles
shit?
of the war started
Guarantee you
when the
during
Germans
this, they were
launched an
just like,
attack around the French
please don't
city of
come
Verdun.
off, please
The
don't
French
come off,
defended
please
it
don't come off.
desperately, leading to hundreds of thousands of casualties. Under pressure, the French called on its allies to do something to draw the Germans' attention away. So the British started their own long and brutal fight, the Battle of the Somme, with 60,000 British casualties on just the first day. It was also here that the British first used one crazy brand new piece of sci-fi technology. The Russians had been getting pushed back further and further into their own territory, but in response to the French call for help, they began a huge offensive, and did really well until they ran out of supplies and got stuck. Seeing how well the Russians had been doing, Romania decided now would be a great time to jump in and win the war, and then they got pounded. The Greeks were fighting amongst themselves about whether to join the war or not. The king liked the Central Powers, while the Prime Minister wanted to join the Allies. After a brief national schism, during which the country split into two, the king finally abdicated and the country reunited. With Allied help, they began a new offensive. In the Middle East, Russia was pushing into Ottoman territory from the north. The British had also made a landing in Mesopotamia to protect Persia's oil fields, and they had also sent a small army up the Tigris River to try to take Baghdad, but the army got sieged in the town of Kut along the way, and eventually surrendered. A new offensive was launched from the south with all-out desert warfare. The offensive was aided by one famous British
Lawrence
officer,
of Arabia,
Lawrence
baby.
of Arabia, who helped lead the Arab tribes in a revolt that wreaked havoc on the Ottoman supply lines. By the time 1917 rolled around, everyone was exhausted. There were mutinies in the French army, the German populace was starving, and the war had drained all of Russia's supplies. There was no clear winner, and it was still anyone's war. The only question now was, who was going to break first? And the answer was Russia. Tired of not eating and mad that a crazy magic homeless guy was calling some of the shots, there was an uprising in Petrograd complete with riots and strikes. The riots turned into a full-scale revolution and a new government overthrew the Tsar. Then a few months later, the Bolsheviks overthrew the new government, and they pulled Russia out of the war. This was great news for Germany, who now only had to focus on the Western Front. But there was still one problem. The pesky United States of America was looking increasingly like it was going to join the war. America had been selling supplies to the Allies throughout the war and was getting super rich off the back of it, meaning it was in fantastic shape and was dangerous to the Germans. So Germany sent a telegram to Mexico saying, wouldn't it be crazy cool if you guys attacked America? But the British intercepted the message, showed it to the Americans, and that was the final straw. American troops began shipping out to
And
Europe.
that's
This
when
was terrible.
shit.
Like, now you
really-
fucked up. Now you fucked up.
Yep.
Now you fucked
fucked
up.
Before the
You were
fresh
fucked up
American
now.
troops arrived, it was now or never, so they started one final attack. They converged their troops and hit hard at the Somme and pushed the Allies back. They hit a second time further north, then again and again. With each hit, the Germans were spending more and more resources, while the Allies were getting better and better at repelling their attacks.
Yep.
By the fifth punch, the Allies held the line and even pushed back. With American troops now arriving in larger numbers, the Allies launched a counterattack, and that was it.
Yep.
The Central Powers were being pushed back on all fronts. Bulgaria collapsed first, followed by the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary, and finally on November 11th, 1918, at 11 o'clock, Germany surrendered. At the peace treaty, Germany was forced to reduce its military, accept war guilt, and pay the bill for the war. After indescribable suffering and millions dead, the world learnt its lesson and never had such an awful war again. For
Wrong.
about 20 years.
So yeah, that's oversimplified, and I gotta say, that was good. That was very good. I'm very happy that, and it was pretty accurate.
It's cool because, like, you know, I know some things about World War One, but I've never seen it described in such a, like, easily, like, palatable, like, way so that I have a better understanding of exactly what the fuck happened now.
Well, you see, with this, there's a person who is who follows us on YouTube who actually does similar graphics like this. However, doesn't have narration like this. Emperor Tiger Star. You've probably seen him. He actually does those graphs that actually shows the progress of the war as it's going. My favorite one that he's ever done is probably the World War II one, and that one is just like, it's harrowing because you hear all of these speeches going on in the background, like from one of the politicians in Germany. You hear them giving a speech about how the Third Reich will achieve supreme victory and all this, and you see the expansion of the Nazis as they spread east. First they spread east, and then they spread west, And then after that, it's just like, holy crap. The Germans almost won. That's one thing that people don't realize, is that if Hitler would have minded himself and would have not tried to invade Russia in the winter, if they would have bunkered down when they did, then they probably would have stood a better chance. But because Hitler got impatient and wanted the war to be won then and there and now, he lost so many of his troops in the winter in 1941. God, man, it was crazy to think. It's crazy to think about that shit. Just how bad things went for the Russians, or for the Russians. I mean, France was dominated. I mean, you saw in this, the fronts pretty much stayed exactly the same for years, whereas Hitler and the Third Reich pretty much took they took Paris in months, and by comparison, that's a huge like massive difference in terms of how technology progressed. And also, there were a lot of things that could have swung the war one way or the other, but God, dude, I tell you, it's nuts to think about how brutal the world used to be. The world used to be so friggin' brutal. I mean, you look at the amount of people who died in wars just from World War I and World War II. That's almost 100 million people right there, gone within the span of 30 years. Thinking about that just makes me just thankful that I live in the time now where I don't have to worry about that shit. Yeah, I got people online calling me fat. Big whoop.
At least we're not freezing to death as Russians and as Germans over in Russia, like in 1942. At least we weren't born in that army.
God. Can only imagine, dude. Can only friggin' imagine.
I fucking hate the cold. I think one of my past lives, I was probably just one of those soldiers that fucking froze to death in Russia, and that's why I hate the cold so much.
Yeah, or maybe you were one of the Russian peasants who died.
Maybe.
Because that's what Stalin did. Stalin abandoned his people and let them freeze to death in Moscow. Just cut off all the supply lines and everything and bombarded his own city when the Germans came in.
Yeah.
That shows you just what kind of an asshole he was. I mean, the Russians lost so many lives, dude. They lost so many lives in that war. I mean, holy mackerel. Just thinking about it just gives me chills. But if you all liked the Oversimplified video, feel free to check out the originals. The originals down below, you'll see them in the description. We can't do justice to how awesome these videos are. And also, also Oversimplified, if you ever do see this, just know that you guys are awesome. This was very fun and very, very cool. And I can't wait to see what else they come out with. So, anyway, yeah. You have anything else to add?
Not really. I'm kind of excited to check out the World War II one at some point.
So. Oh, yeah. So, all right, everybody. Until next time, signing off, I'm Nate.
I'm Nick.
And we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.